everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am so excited to be making this video because it does apply to my life. I have some takes that I would like to give and also share a bit of a history lesson and other people's experiences with what I've experienced. And maybe it'll just help someone else out there. Because then I did watch these videos on TikTok. I was like, oh yeah, this applies to me. And also from my own work experience. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so I am from South Africa, and um, one thing that I did notice since I started working last year, I am the only Black woman working with a group of white men, and the youngest of them is 35 years old. There are 50-year-olds, 40-year-olds, 60-year-olds that I work with, and they're all white men. Occasionally, there is another lady that works with us and she comes in once in a while, and when that happens I'm still the only black person, but I'm not the only woman working there. And never in my life would I have thought this would happen. For a long time it's just me and my sister, so I'm not used to having like any male energy near me, like being around boys, interacting with boys. I was not a huge fan. I had my girlfriends, I hung out with girls. I even told my parents, please, I wish I could go to a Catholic boarding school because I'm Catholic. So now it's like they were like, no, both of my parents went to boarding schools. They're like, you are not going there. So, for me, it's just like I love being a woman now, especially as I've gotten older. I've embraced like womanhood, girlhood, like even the depressing parts and things like that. There are still some parts of womanhood that I'm like, oh, this sucks. I hope I can embrace it. But right now, it's okay. So now coming into work and then being the only woman there, I have experienced so much mess and so much nonsense. Like when they say, like white men can be mediocre and they still get what they want. For me, I at first obviously it's viewed as a negative thing, but I do try to put a positive spin on things. And even though a lot of the white men have had so much audacity with me, I have now taken it with the mindset, especially last year, of I just need to have the confidence of a mediocre white man. I need to have the audacity of men in general, because a lot of men, they have audacity. They will ask you for things and give you nothing. And if you ask them for things, they're like, whoa, chill, like calm down. So for me, it's just like I see the hypocrisy, the double standards, and I'm like, I'm gonna try my best to use it to my advantage, to so that we can all work in harmony. Like I have to work here. Like I was placed here in order for me to graduate and to like be a fully working person. And I'm going to use office politics. I'm going to try my best to weasel in with the boss, be my boss's pet. I don't care. Like everyone needs to leave me alone. Anyway, so everyone that I'm working with is Afrikaans, which I think it plays a significant part because the culture is different than just, let's say, regular white people. Um, a lot of Afrikaans people, I think a lot of Afrikaans people are viewed as the black people of white people of the world. They are in Africa. They have adapted new cultures, heritage, and language based on the people that they interact with, which is mainly black people. So it's very interesting. And I did find a video on Rhodesia specifically, which is now Zimbabwe. When I was in high school, my English teacher, I love her. She got me into enjoying classic literature and reading. She was the best. She said that she grew up in Zimbabwe, formerly Rhodesia. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. I didn't even like, this is in like 2016. So to hear that, I was like, oh wow, Rhodesia, she's a white woman. Like it was so weird to think like what some white people were born in Zimbabwe, in like Africa, quote unquote. But I was 16. I was ignorant to a lot of things. So hearing that was just very insightful. So yeah, then a video did pop up on YouTube and it was about Rhodesia. So I'm just gonna play it here because I feel like the context is very similar to all white people born within the Southern Hemisphere. Even Australians are viewed as like not lesser than, but as just other to white people. Like they were a penal colony, which I was under the impression it's people from Europe that were prisoners, that were convicts. They didn't want them on their continent. So they shipped them off to the black continent basically to Australia, and they got rid of the Aboriginals and they made it their home and things like that. So it's very interesting, the complicated history of white people in the southern hemisphere. So let me just play the video for you now.
In the latest issue of Islander magazine, there is an article by Will Tanner entitled Rhodesia, A Nation Betrayed, which I read with fascination, as it brought together several strands of thought that I've been mulling over and provides a concrete example of how esoteric thinkers of the 20th century, though their roots are divergent and circuitous, ended up arriving at the same conclusion about liberalism. In his article, Tanner details what was different about Rhodesia than the other African colonies ruled by the Europeans. South Africa was predominantly Boer, Mozambique and Angola were Portuguese, and German East Africa was, of course, German. However, Rhodesia was primarily English, settled almost exclusively from the UK, and it retained a very strong Anglo culture right up until its collapse. Rhodesia famously described itself as more British than the British, and it really showed. Before Cecil Rhodes had led his pioneer column into what would become Rhodesia in 1890, the land was sparsely occupied by tribes who lived at a subsistence level in what were essentially pre-technological agrarian and pastoralist groups. Though the English population of Rhodesia was always very small, peaking at around 300,000 in the 1970s, with around 7 million Africans, this relatively small number of Brits were able to create a nation with high living standards and industrial capacity, which was capable of fielding a tightly disciplined military known as the Fire Force.
This is a young country to which the white man came only 120 years ago. Today, the white man is outnumbered 20 to 1 by the black. But the political power is his, because the Rhodesian doctrine is that the reins of government must remain in what Mr. Smith describes as civilized hands. It's this insistence that makes a settlement impossible, while the British government stands firm on the 5 principles.
Okay, so to cut the long story short on the rest of the video, which you can go to the YouTube channel that was credited, the people that had settled in Africa saw that they were going to make life better for the Africans as well as for themselves. They were going to civilize everyone, and eventually everyone would live in, like, not necessarily equality, but with equity. You know, the black people would be able to own property and live a more civilized life and work against communism, which was what the ANC was for at the time. Nelson Mandela was a communist. He adopted communist values. And even today, that's why we have close ties with China right now. But the West knew that that's not going to work. It's not for the best interest of the South African people. But the British people that were living in England, they were not even on the scene live to see what was going on. They said, no, that's racist. That was basically how it ended. And it is a slippery slope. It does become more difficult to deal with. Because I love the UK, I love England. It has a special place in my heart because I used to go to school there. So, like, as much as I want to side with them, I'm thinking, like, imagine what the like South Africa might have been if communism, for example, didn't take over from the ANC. Because now it's like over 20 years later, and we're all just like, oh, 30 years later, actually, and we're all just like, oh, the ANC has ruined everything. So it's just like, oh, Nelson Mandela is rolling in his grave. I don't even know what to think. It all went downhill when Zuma came into power personally. But knowing that history and the context, we see that there would definitely be so much more tension. There is currently a lot of tension in South Africa, racial tension, class tension, just economic tension in general. And yeah, the rest of us still have to live our day to day lives in this country, even though we can see like the wealth disparities, you know, some people are better off. I, for one, I'm a person of color, woman of color, but I am very privileged. So there's a lot of juxtaposition when I do meet other black people that have to take taxis, that are struggling to like make ends meet, and they ask me to borrow their money. And it's just like I'm put into that Oreo or coconut space where people are just like, oh, you're so privileged and you're living a better life than some white people, even. Like, I've made friends on the job that are different races than me. And it's just like very awkward to be like literally in the middle of something that is very political, very economic, and it's just like I'm kind of not involved. I have the privilege to just take a step back. And even the car that I drive, it is amazing. Thank you, God, for my mom. Because the only reason why I was probably, okay, maybe not the only reason, but a factor into why I was offered another job by my employer another year is probably because I drive a nice car. I speak very well. I'm very polite and respectful. You know, I'm not quote unquote ghetto hood. I don't do a lot of the stereotypical black things. So one of my white colleagues, he's a white man, of course, he did ask, like, so you think you're better than us because you drive a nice car, because you speak proper? I was like, oh my gosh, this is so awkward. No, I would never think that. Um, and even just small microaggressions, like the other day they ordered pizza, and I was like, oh, what flavor is this? They were like, oh, it has bacon and pork and meat. And I was like, oh, okay, I'm thinking of ordering pizza for my little brother. And they were like, oh, you're not like the others. You actually eat meat. I mean, eat pork. I was like, what is that supposed to mean? And he said, oh, yeah, most blacks don't eat pork. I was like, oh, dang. Wow, thanks. Yeah, I'm not like other girls. Oh, it's just like this. I literally have to just be so blasé about things, and I can't get offended by things that they say because I know it's like they're ignorant. It's not personal. They just say it, and I'm not going to take it to heart. Which honestly, last year, really like strengthened me because honestly, I am a crybaby deep down inside, but now it's like I understand, like, oh, this is just the way some of them are. And me being here, I guess, I hope it changes their perspective because the next sad sack that comes in, I hope they are strong. Like, literally, also in the work environment, being the only woman, even woman of color, working here, it's like there's a word you can get verbally raped where you bend down to pick something up from work and then a man will be standing right behind you and he'll say, oh, you're harassing me. Oh, and he'll be so close in your personal space and make you feel so uncomfortable. And it's just like, is this what people go through in the work environment, working with just men? Like, I survived 365 days working with just men. Literally, it's a nightmare. It's a living nightmare. There's a quote from a book that was like, gosh, if I can just remember, mentally, I crave intimacy. Physically, I fear men, and then spiritually, men disgust me. I was like, yeah, so relatable, so relatable. Even though I think the author of that stole her information from Tumblr, which is so funny. Oh, it's not funny. It's just like, come on, girl. I don't know. So yeah, it's been very interesting being in a work environment as someone in her 20s, early 20s. Now I'm in my mid 20s. It feels wonderful. I can't wait to be 30, to be set in my ways, to be stronger, more disciplined, and to be more firm with people. Like, no, I don't want to do that. And working where I'm working now, I live very far away from work. So I have to drive there every day. I am always late. That is one flaw that I have had, and I'm trying to improve this new year, 2025. But a lot of the times people would ask me, oh, can you work my shift? Can you do overtime for me? And I have to say, I'm sorry, I can't. I live far away. And normally I'm not the type of person to say no. So me being able to say that, I feel like, oh, wow, I actually did it. It feels kind of empowering to be able to say no, even though it's just circumstantial. And one thing about me, I will make up excuses like, no, my parents are traveling, or I don't have a babysitter or something. I don't know. So yeah, I think there is definitely more, but in general, I just want to now share some experiences of some other TikToks that I did see of people sharing being an introvert as a black lady. So yeah, that's how I'm going to end this video. Thank you so much for listening. Subscribe if you want. Otherwise, have an amazing day and a wonderful new year.
The Christmas dinner lady really put her foot in that roast, honestly. Oh, Elaine, you coming to the pub with us after the Christmas party?
Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. I can't. I'm going to sit this one out. Sorry. I'm just trying to lay off the party and everything. Yeah, I'm just trying to, just be chilled and everything, And plus, I'm pretty introverted anyway.
No, you're usually so charismatic. No, come on. Being humble.
No, I'm just usually to myself and stuff. So, like, too much social gatherings just...
No, you're not. You're so courageous, guy. I was looking forward to turning up with my sister. I really wanted to get crunk in the club, in your natural habitat. You know what I mean? And plus, didn't you say that you're outgoing and extroverted anyway?
When did I say that?
I'm pretty sure. Oh, stop trying to be sensible. You know, you're supposed to be fun. You're supposed to be the fun one.
Why is it that Black women aren't allowed to be introverted at work? Why is there this unspoken expectation for us to be chipper and excited or funny or entertaining? Otherwise, we don't like our job, or we don't like our coworkers, or we're not fitting into the culture.